is art not essential when it is the first thing we reach for?
When I think of the role of artists in the revolution, as it were, I think that we have to start considering art as a service. And who I'm in service to as an artist is the people who consume my work, the people who are most affected by institutional racism, the people who live in society's margins. It's my job, it's my duty to reflect their emotions in my work and to tell those stories honestly and authentically. So when my people are experiencing rage, it's my job as a poet to reflect rage in my work. When my people are experiencing joy, it is my job as a poet to reflect joy, to cultivate joy, to create futures where we are happy, where justice exists, and where we as people feel valued, are valued in society. So when we think about art as service, we think about who it serves. And for me, it serves those who society typically leaves behind. I am a spokesman for my people. And so it is my job to accurately report what my people are feeling and experiencing. And that, to me, if you can do that as an artist and stay true to that work and stay true to those ethics, then you have done the work. When I think about poets specifically or artists who give language to our collective experiences and who are also responsible with their artistry, I think first of Toni Morrison, who left us the interviews, the essays, the fiction, the nonfiction, the painting of Black folks in honest experiences and authentic environments and in all representations of our emotion. Toni Morrison painted us in rage and in happiness and in joy and in sorrow. I think a lot of Ntozake Shange and the language she gives to Black women's experiences specifically and for colored girls. I think of Nikki Giovanni. I think of Sonia Sanchez, whose work WJ said, her work lives in her body, shows up in the world as an authentic artist, and appreciates the ethics of writing our collective experiences. I think of N.K. Jemisin, who I'm new to her work, but she writes Afrofuturism. And what a responsibility to write Black folks into the future, to ensure that we have one, to give language to what our societies may look like when we are loved and happy and held. So all of those artists to me exhibit what it means to be of service to the people who most need art in the times of revolution.
Sugar, don't go running now, River. Come back here. You owe me. You owe my mother for the years you robbed my father of. You owe the homies. Pulled over on petty charges, bound by the chain gang, while white folks still in Colorado build empires. Hey, River.
I know. When I was writing Ashlee Reckons with the Mississippi, I was thinking of reckoning in the term of counting. So Bell Hooks writes that true social justice requires complex accounting, which means we have to be able to say these are the things that were taken from me and my folks. And so Ashlee Reckons with the Mississippi is me listing the things that I feel like the Mississippi River, which is a metaphor for society, for racism as an institution. This is what you owe me. You owe me education because you took that from my folks. You owe me space where I can feel loved. You owe me a world where I can feel safe. The Mississippi as a metaphor or historic racism has taken a lot from me and my family. I talk about the murder of my great grandfather, which I didn't learn about until recently. We talk a lot about our matriarchs, but we don't really talk about our patriarchs. And my mom told me that's because our patriarch was taken from us a long time ago. And so that's Ashlee Reckons with the Mississippi. It's me saying I am a child of these folks. I'm a child of the Mississippi Delta, and I am here to take back everything that was taken from me.
I opened the mouth of the Mississippi, peered down its throat and asked, did you swallow my great-granddaddy's bones, the river? Chomps. Said, silly girl, don't you know better than to go looking for love in these waters? The year is 1952. My great-grandfather is murdered by a group of white boys coming home from prom. The river watches and says nothing. Gulps his blood and burps in satisfaction. The river spits me out a little further north a few years later. The river don't know I keep score. Don't know my grandmother left a trail of pecans for me to follow back home. My grandmother smuggled my mother up north so that she could bring forth children who ain't afraid of fire or brimstone. My grandmother fed me Mississippi tamales. My teeth learned how to grind corn before I knew the cost of the soil. Hey, river, I am back for my kin. I am back for the innocence of little black boys and black girls. I am back for the dignity you robbed my grandmother of. River, you ought to know I'm the hell and the hot water. You ought to know I want smoke in the city. I don't know I want the ashes of the white boys who murdered my grandfather. You ought to know I want my 400 acres inflated. For the land my great-granddaddy didn't get to see, you owe me, river. Do you not tire of the stench? The odor of my beloved that slices through the thickness of night. Oh, river. I want justice. I want my grandmother's name on a school where white boys learn her name in history instead of that of her oppressors. Oh, river. I want our people breathing and happy and healthy and reaping the harvest my grandmother sowed alongside cotton and sugarcane. Don't go running now. You owe me, river. You owe my mother for the years you robbed my father of. You owe the homies pulled over on petty charges and bound by the chain gang while white boys in Colorado get to build empires. Oh, river, I'm coming back for everything you got a mine in these shallow waters. Say I'm coming back, and you will pay me. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise.
60-second science class in the self-checkout. Appetite, like energy, cannot be lost, only change its form, so when my stomach, pockets, are empty, I bite the Armani-gloved hand that feeds me. Question. If the ancestors were sharecroppers living in Eden on credit, what was the price of the apple?
One of my favorite quotes by James Baldwin talks about how the artist has a duty as a sort of spiritual historian. So it's the artist's responsibility to render in certain terms what it means to be human, what it is to relate to other human beings in a way that respects their individuality and their respective lived experiences. And so I think that the artist's role is to make art, but to enact that theory into praxis, that taking of the ideology that comes out through the artwork and enacting that into sort of a material condition. Theory without praxis is a book club. It's not a revolution. You need to choose revolution every single day. Artists, in order to be revolutionary, need to be enacting that materially. There's nothing inherently revolutionary about a poem. It's a passive form of art. There's nothing inherently revolutionary about a painting. It's an art form, right? But the thing that you do with that painting, the way you display that poem, the way that you put that medium into the world, that's what creates the revolution. That's what imagines that greater possibility in a material way, right? You have to go out into the world as an artist and decide that you're going to change it, not just observe it. So that's what I think the artist and the art has to do with the revolution, is that we make it happen through the images, through the words, but also through our actions, through our presence, and through our determination to succeed.
Into and ain't that a metaphor that both the barrels and the bodies be black, but that only one be protected by the law? I woke up this morning to a fire alarm, which is to say that I woke up black and femme and queer in Florida.
I wrote Hecatone when I was a graduate student in classical archaeology at Florida State University. I was the only queer Black person in our department. And naturally, that has some rub with greater administration sometimes. I left that program ultimately because of the kind of tension I was feeling just around my identity and lived experience in the department. But before I left the program, I wrote this poem because I saw myself as a sort of sacrificial lamb in this department. I saw myself as someone who could always be blamed when things went wrong, right? And so because of that, I was feeling kind of simultaneously special, right? Because that's a very significant role of the whipping boy in any community, but also totally demolished in terms of my intellectual confidence, in terms of what I felt like I could bring to the table. And so, that combined with the fact that, people in Florida were openly slurring my name in my face. People in Florida were openly, N-wording me in conversation. People were openly misgendering me in conversation, even after I had, clarified my pronouns and my identity. And so after a certain point, you just kind of feel like every morning you're combusting. Every morning you wake up and there is ignition under you. There is that flame underneath you, and you have to try to control it, contain it, so that you don't overflow and burn everything down every single day. It's a slow turning up of a pilot light. It's very dangerous in terms of the way that I conceptualize my emotional state. And so I wrote that poem because I was so angry at Florida for being so smug about the way it was being bad to me. I didn't do a lot of editing to that poem. I didn't do a lot of revision. I just kind of let it come out. It was very emotional, the process. And so it's really interesting to see how that poem took shape versus, poems that I wrote when I was in a better place emotionally, when I was being cared for better. So I love that poem, but I definitely seek to hopefully leave it behind in a revolutionary world.
Good. Every Black queer person is seconds away from combustion. In fact, I woke up this morning on fire, which is to say that I woke up in Florida today, which is to say that Florida is always hot because the devil always has business here, that this house has been burning since he fell from heaven and landed on Seminole shores. I woke up this morning ablaze, which is to say that I woke up Black in Florida, which is to say that being Black in Florida is knowing that everyone can see the smoke, but that no one is coming to help. That the first responders see your size and decide to let you burn yourself out. That whole city blocks the color of your skin get reduced to the color someone else calls it. I woke up this morning, skin melting into my bed sheets, which is to say that I woke up Black and femme in Florida. Which is to say that Florida is the pile of kindling where mothers are forced to give birth to dead babies, where the only thing Black and femme and welcome is a barrel with a bullet that whispers death to the bodies it pours itself into. And ain't that a metaphor? How both the barrels and the bodies be Black, but that only one be protected by the law. I woke up this morning to a fire alarm, which is to say that I woke up Black and femme and queer in Florida. Which is to say that a voice I did not recognize screamed at me to get out while I still could. That damn it, there's smoke coming from the pyres, and it's only a matter of time before they call you a faggot and then make you into one. That every kiss is clandestine tinderbox, every touch fans the flames, every sigh is grassland smoldering around us simply because I love the way she glows. And ain't that a metaphor? How this body be phosphorus tipped so full of light that the stick shrivels underneath its holy. I woke up this morning gasping for air. I woke up this morning choking on the smoke. I woke up this morning calling for the officers and the water in their fire hoses instead of running from it. And ain't that a metaphor? How Florida makes scorch marks of my Black, my queer, my femme, then calls itself the Sunshine State like that shit is worth celebrating. And ain't that a metaphor? Ain't this a metaphor? And shouldn't I be thankful? Because after all, I woke up this morning.
Mom had rules when I was young. Pants should be under $10, shirts less than $5, a good jacket maybe 15 or 20. I'm not sure if she made these rules or inherited them as I did, but I keep them with me wherever I go. Know that
Ariana Brown is an incredible poet out of Texas who has been creating not only some incredible work around Black girlhood and survival kind of instinct, but also some incredible work towards a socialist poetry politic, towards a collective poetry politic. How do we imagine a poetry without capitalism? How do we imagine a poetry that, doesn't necessarily have to suck us dry in order for us to eat, right? She's done some incredible thinking toward that, has done some incredible research toward that. And so I would definitely say that she's an artist that I look up to in terms of the practical ethic of her politics. So I definitely think Ariana Brown for sure. Someone else who inspires me greatly, Mecca Verdell is an incredible spoken word poet, actress, screenwriter out of Baltimore. She herself has organized youth protests. She herself has been on the front line of direct action and bringing that change into the material realm, right? She's someone who doesn't just talk about it, she is about it. And I really respect that. She's an incredible, as I said, artist, but someone who realizes that we can't just create art in our homes and expect the world to change. We have to go out and embody that art and be intentional about how we bring that to life. So Ariana and Mecca are two people, one older, one younger, but two people that I definitely look up to a lot when I think about how I want poetry to exist in the future and how I want it to rebel and revolt.
This is an ode to the hungry artist, the parable of the great banquet.
Parable of the hungry artist. So, Parable of the Great Banquet, is the name of the poem. And I was scrolling my timeline, kind of doom scrolling in 2019, and saw this weird headline come up on my Twitter. And it said, this performance artist had walked into this very fancy, art exhibition and taken this banana that was taped on the wall as part of an art installation, this $120,000 banana that's taped on the wall with masking tape. The performance artist walked up to the wall, ripped the banana off the wall, and ate it. And I have never seen such a good metaphor for a miracle happening in front of people's eyes. People were forced to question why no one had eaten the banana before, why the banana was allowed to rot on the wall for $120,000 when this exhibition took place in Miami, where there are more unhoused individuals than most cities in this country. So how is it, right, that we've got food insecurity, that we have all of these material needs, and yet there is a banana somewhere that is taped on a wall, not for consumption, which is what bananas are for, but to invite spectacle, invite attention. That's what I was saying when I meant that, no art is inherently radical. There's nothing radical about taking an everyday object and assigning an arbitrary capitalistic value to it, right? There's nothing revolutionary about that kind of art. It panders to, in my opinion, the laziest kind of activism. I really respected the performance artist David Tatuna for having, the guts to walk into this exhibition full of incredibly wealthy people and say, this is a sham. This is ridiculous, right? This is not art. You have deluded yourself. We're so far off base from what art actually is and what we think we're doing here. So I ended up writing Parable of the Great Banquet because I came up a Baptist. I came up, in my mama's church. And so that is how I saw that parable, right? I saw it as, we're all sitting down and, Jesus looks over to somebody and says, wait a minute, now are we sure that this is what we want to do, right? Are we sure that this is how we want to go about things? So I was so inspired by that single act that I was like, what a biblical scenario to have take place in real life. I had to write about it.
Being born and raised in the South means I have more stories than time to tell any of them. One of the stranger chapters of my life is set in Tallahassee, Florida, when I was a graduate student at the Florida State University. I was preparing for my comprehensive exams in classical archaeology when a news alert popped up on my iPhone.
On December 7th, 2019, Georgian performance artist David DeTuna entered the Art Basel Miami exhibition, removed an artwork valued at $120,000 from the gallery wall, then ate it. This is an ode to the hungry artist, the parable of the Great Banquet. Mere days after we paid our respects to Chairman Fred, we sat on the stoop slack-jawed as a man ate a $120,000 banana. Sucked our teeth and used that the hunger's gonna kill us first. 60-second science class in the self-checkout. Appetite, like energy, is not lost, only changes form, so when my stomach, pockets, are empty, I bite the Armani-gloved hand that feeds me. Question: if the ancestors were sharecroppers living in Eden on credit, what was the price of the apple? Question: if we still have not tired of tilling the fields without tasting the fruit, what is the value of our heads? In the year of our Lord 2019, Jesus walked into a brightly colored spectacle, peeled forbidden yield, let teeth break skin into bleeding, performed a miracle, then smiled as centurions led him away from shocked public. Peace so still, it shows the cruelty in starving, command its witnesses to go forth, multiply.
And to shoot until whatever is trying to kill my baby cannot offer up an explanation as to why.
Yeah, so the role of the artist is to be a witness. It's to remind us of what has happened. We are, in a sense, the memory bank. We are the cartography. We draw the maps of what has happened. And through our art and through our storytelling, we are explaining, we are painting the picture with our words, however else the mediums we choose to witness and to testify what is going on. And therefore, none of it's lost, right? That's why during, fascism and all these other forms of dictatorships, they censor the artist first so that we cannot disseminate information, so that we cannot give people hope, the ability to imagine something different. So yeah, basically the role of the artist is to be a badass and to be a witness.
Love is to sharpen your steak knife and prepare to do more than just watch the blood ooze out of the body of the poor bastard that bled and died to fill my belly. Don't bring me a deer, no mooing heifer. Bring me the neck of the man who burns down an entire city of my kinfolk asleep. Watch me hush his throat, yes. Lullaby every threat he learned from his father. Yes, love is the revolution. Love ain't gonna have me standing inside while my people marching, protesting, and damn well we got a right to riot. Ain't that gospel? We dry heaved in those hush harbors until heaven cracked open and said, here, time moves forward and backwards. And it is the scent carried in the flesh of the magnolias that finds us fighting, still fighting. We ain't ran out of magic, ain't subscribed to the dreary news of today. Love is to extend a plate of hot grits in one hand and to hold a gun steady in the other while the police threatens to knock down your door. Shoot, 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 until whatever is trying to kill my baby can't offer up an explanation as to why. Love will have me sharpening my steak knife before dinner and praying that this house don't catch fire. And if it should, I'll carve a hole right here. And we'll follow the voices in the street, the masked faces, the brown skin glittering, singing, going to march all over God's heaven, going to march all over God's heaven. The cops who murdered Breonna Taylor are asleep at home with their families. The cops who murdered Breonna Taylor are at home with their families. The cops who murdered Breonna Taylor are with their families. The cops who murdered Breonna Taylor are asleep. The cops who murdered Breonna Taylor are at home. The cops murdered Breonna Taylor at home. Cops murdered Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor was murdered.
Some artists, poets that have inspired my work and who really have used their work to influence a revolution. James Baldwin, right? When we think about what it means to be a witness, James Baldwin, you know, when I think about No Name in the Streets, when I think about Go Tell on the Mountain, all these different things that approach us and tell us like what he has witnessed, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, whether it's through essay, it's always, he does it with such a discernment that we know what is happening. And we also know not to fall victim to certain tropes, right? We have to stay focused or we will be destroyed, either by our inner workings or by outside forces. And my good mother, Toni Morrison. You know, Toni Morrison was out here doing the work. And before she even wrote her own book, she was editing, you know, Angela Davis, Muhammad Ali, Gwendolyn Brooks, right? All these different people's, right, works. And it's like, you know, it's to make sure that the work continues, to push the work forward, to always say that, you know, we were here, that our work matters, and not to prove that it matters. It's to say, oh, we are living a life, and this is the life that we have lived.
Aurora, Nile, baptized, they call you bitch. Mutant, meaner than a junkyard dog. Devastate your name until you answer.
Yeah, so when I was writing the Aurora Storm poem, I was just thinking about the contributions of Black women, how powerful they are, but how oftentimes in society, people try to minimalize the contributions of Black women. So Storm is a weather witch, right? But that also goes into like the Black girl magic part of it, how we're always trying to silence that, you know? And they were always trying to minimalize her contributions, make her drizzle, make a little scattered rain. I'm like, no, Storm can annihilate all of us.
Miss Monroe split the sky for us. Rain down melodies. Lash your mane of alabaster back and forth. Sing us a song laced with lightning. You come from women who make the earth shake and tremble. Women who said fuck the police before us a song. Show us the storm roiling beneath your flesh. Fix a day in darkness if you must. See, men gotta hear thunder to make them believe in God. Gotta witness a sandstorm silence the sun. See, I know that you're tired, so tired of proving to them that you ain't ordinary. Anointed with oil, Aurora, now baptized. They call you bitch, mutant, meaner than a junkyard dog. Devastates your name until you answer them with fist, with floods, with fury. Miss Monroe, split the sky. And if not for us, cover yourself in a cloud storm. Claim all of yourself. You deserve music you can dance to. You can dance to the music if you forget to stop the rain. Miss Monroe, no one will blame you if you forgot to stop the rain. How long have you been stopping the rain?
Symbolic victories, but if the past is prologue, then the preface to our future is history. And 2020 appears to be the year that, much like perfect sight, we might finally begin to see things clear.
So I think about art truly in the context of it being a public service done to society, right? Like, I don't think that there's any advancement that we've ever seen in the history of this world, any progression that's occurred in this world where it's not been a corollary, like where there's not been an accompanying advancement happening in the arts. And so when I think about that role of an artist, when I think about the role of art in this context, it's a catalyst for change, but it's also a contextualizer, right? Like, it helps us place boundaries around what's happening for ourselves individually, as well as for ourselves collectively. When I conceive of creating art and honestly fostering revolution, I do it from the context of how am I upending social orders? How am I attacking positions of power in a sense that reveals the incredible power in the powerlessness, right? And so that's the way that I try to think of and conceive of art in the context of a revolution, in the context of advocating for change. It simply comes from this aspect of, like, how are you impacting the empire? How are you affecting change in that regard? And so if you're not doing that, then it's not a revolution.
But perhaps first, we have to put a face to the music. Ebony-hued, big lips and wide nose. A family tree with a godfather of soul saying it loud. I'm Black and I'm proud.
One of the pieces that I did was called Face the Music, which came really written in the heat of what we saw as the social protests and the uprisings that occurred in 2020. It comes from the place of just looking at the grand irony of an entire world and a society that feeds and thrives off of Black imagination, Black creativity found in this particular context of music, but yet the open and like cavalier disregarding of Black bodies that house that creativity, that house that imagination. And so it really just calls into order that, like, if you are going to love this long line of Black brilliant artistic creators, from Billie Holiday to Living Color to Public Enemy, fill in the blank, then you also gotta love, or rather you have to reconcile the fact that you are using the bodies that house this as disposable. And so that's really what Face the Music is about. It's like truly putting a face onto that music.
What a time it is in this country to face the music. But perhaps first, we have to put a face to the music. Ebony hues, big lips and wide nose. A family tree with a godfather of soul sang it loud. I am black and I'm proud. Whether Stax or Motown, the fact is profound. Black music is this nation's greatest cultural export. It is a source of refuge and rebellion, protest and peace. Billie Holiday singing of strange fruit swinging in the southern breeze. Emmett Till found face down, floating in a Spotify stream. No man know if the day, the night, or the hour. But when Chuck D told us to fight the power, when Gil Scott got us to think in depth, when Marian Anderson had to sing on those Lincoln steps, when Marvin asked, "What's happening, brother? Which way to America? Living color, NWA, or Darius Rucker?" It is no wonder the black voice is an authentic American voice, prophetic and prudent. And if the music matters, then perhaps so should the black lives that have produced it.
If I'm to think about artists now that are doing that for me, as always, I say, like, I come out of a hip hop context, I come out of a musical aspect. And so when I look at like the range of artists that I see, I'm looking at someone like No Name out of Chicago, right? Like, I'm looking at the work that she's doing with her music, but also leveraging that music in a context of creating book clubs and ways that inspire youth coming up, as well as people who are her age. I also think about like contemporary artists, contextual artists like Hank Willis Thomas. I think about the South African artist, Mary Sabande, someone like Kara Walker, right, who focuses on silhouettes and things like that. Whenever I see any of their public art installments or any of those ways that they make the esoteric and the excellent accessible to people, I find that that is the way that those are the artists that I key in on, that I see really making that change.
My fan base is whoever's in earshot. I'm a Cherokee spear shot at wherever your fear stopped. Sipping on Deer Park, music booming out the back trunk. Raised black fists with brass knucks, I'm that tougher.
This other one was interesting. It came out of this idea of symbolic victory, which is what the piece is essentially entitled. It was written really because we were seeing Confederate monuments coming down in just a violent form, right? And there was a lot of like pushing back that you saw, well-meaning and sometimes not well-meaning conservatives or non-conservatives, white people, or even just like elder black people who are just kind of being dismissive of it a lot of times and saying, well, that energy would be better spent enacting policy or working for change in society as opposed to tearing down these monuments. And so I just view that as kind of shortchanging what was actually occurring, right? Because if you're truly looking at these monuments that had existed for years and years and decades, then you're seeing just the psychological attack that they have on an oppressed people. There's power in symbols, right? There's power in upending those symbols and reimagining those. And the things that look like they're violent actually also could be an opportunity for us to dream, for us to imagine, for us to rethink how it is that we've been doing this thing we call life.
They will tell you that it is just a symbol. They will say that these are simply statues. They will try to downplay the vestiges of white supremacists' remnant. That which is left over, often stronger than what was there before. The Civil War's pot liquor, but ain't no healing in this broth. The Confederate flag is America's swastika, cut from the same cloth. For over a century, we have raised a glass to the losers. We have toasted traitors and tipped our caps to constitutional abusers. We let democracy dance with the daughters of the Confederacy. And now, the reckoning. It feels unsettling, threatening, like a knee on your neck by those sworn to serve and protect. Like using the last gasp of your breath to scream for a mother who is dead. Big Floyd just wanted to touch the world. You can see it happening in the face of his beautiful little girl. Streets across the globe have been filled to the brim in support of BLM social unrest. This, a necessary societal function. But see, the little known secret is that growth often resembles destruction. Endings can be beginnings, reinventions, reimaginings onto a blank canvas. And so, in honor of George, we are not taking this life for granted. However, we are taking down the granite, marble, and bronze stone memorials that have tried to honor that which is deplorable. We are courting the good trouble of racial justice and equality, liberation in a manner that is historical. They will tell you that it is just a symbol, that these are simply statues and this is a symbolic victory. But if the past is prologue, then the preface to our future is history. And 2020 appears to be the year that, much like perfect sight, we might finally begin to see things clear.
I think that, well, first, I think we need to remember that being an artist and being an activist are two different jobs that just happen to kind of intersect a lot. I don't know that every artist is obligated to be part of the revolution, but as far as people, you know, Nina Simone once asked, how can you be an artist and not reflect the times? So right now, the times is a sort of revolution, like a sort of a racial awakening for America right now. It might not be reflected in legislation yet. It might not be reflected in policy, but it's reflected in the streets. It's reflected in constant protests that still haven't really stopped. So I think that an artist's job is to record that. An artist's job is to document that and document it from the the point of view that gets spoken of for the left. The media is not going to reflect the movement in all of its truth. I work for a media company that does our best to, but the media has never really been good at that. So artists pick up the slack.
An artist's duty, as far as I'm concerned, is to reflect the times. I think that is true of painters, sculptors, poets, musicians. As far as I'm concerned, it's their choice. But I choose to reflect the times and the situations in which I find myself. That to me is my duty.
Nina Simone definitely embodied that. Sam Cooke embodied that. They're both artists who put their careers on the line to, to do what white people at the time didn't want them to do, which was sing songs about black problems. There's plenty of artists who have really been about that life. I look to a lot of local artists. Right now, I think local artists are the ones who dedicate their lives to activism. So I'll speak for Atlanta. You look at Teresa Davis and Daryl Funn, poets out of Atlanta who have been almost single-handedly responsible for keeping the scene alive here. And they've dedicated their lives to helping Black youth in Atlanta. They've dedicated their lives to giving people a space to express themselves. And people like John Good, who don't stay out of the street out of Atlanta, who are never not a part of building the community here. Michael Harriot, who's my coworker at the Ruby, he also came out of the poetry scene. And he also did poetry in Atlanta. And he's also been arrested at protests before. He's also actually challenged voter fraud in Georgia and actually sparked investigations into voter fraud in Georgia, or voter suppression, rather. So yeah, from the past to the present, artists have always been there to be part of the solution.
1 year ago, yesterday, I lived the worst nightmare anyone could imagine. I watched as my daughter, Sandra Bland, was lowered into the ground in a coffin. She was my fourth of 5 daughters, and she was gone. No, not on administrative leave, but on permanent leave from this earth. Found hanging in a jail cell after an unlawful traffic stop and an unlawful arrest. 6 other women have died in custody that same month.
So the casket poem was part of a 4-part poem where I covered Nina Simone's Cinnamon for Run. For the one that casket came out of, I covered Bob Marley's Johnny Was a Good Man. And that was basically a humanizing of the underserved Black community. People talk about Black-on-Black crime and violence in the Black community like it's something that happened in a vacuum, like it's something that is something that's not attached to systemic racism in America. So that whole thing, and that was like I did the casket because that's my favorite of the 4 poems that I wrote. That's my favorite one by a large margin, because it reminds you that when Black people die, families suffer. You know what I mean? It reminds you that these people have families. They came from families. They came from something. They had a lived experience that brought them to where they were when they died. That's what that whole piece was about. That was one of those that stressed me out to write almost. I'm thinking of friends that I had that aren't here anymore. You know what I'm saying? I'm thinking of, so yeah, that was difficult. I remember performing that piece once in front of a woman who had recently lost her son, and she came up to me after the show. And we had like this long emotional talk about it. You know what I'm saying? So that's a difficult one, but it's one that I love.
The funeral may be the only party where you can be invited and still feel so unwelcome. And when the guest of honor is survived by his old earth, ooh. When a mother buries her child, she buries so much of herself that it's her remains that become most painful to view. We pick our smiles carefully. It's never really polite to show your teeth or speak at a level above a dull murmur or carry on any conversation beyond how good he was. And when viewing a handsome young corpse, you don't comment on how like himself he looks, or about the yellow and gray tinges on his plastic face, the fingerfold grin formed at the mouth, the mortician's craftsmanship. He's a mannequin in a doll suit, and still it never seemed so real until this moment. We avoid eye contact with the bereaved, but can't stop looking her direction. We're just not sure how to approach condolences. I mean, what do you say? Even us, the young men who'd grown accustomed to losing our brethren and holding up our end of a pine box, we never quite figured out how to call him a grieving mother. Now, we know what not to say. We don't tell her that God has a plan for all this, that he's just called one of his angels home, or that he don't give us no more than we can handle. These words reek of first world privilege, words spoken by those who only think they know suffering. At our assigned pews, we sit, stand, and bow our heads as instructed. We chant our ashes and amens and hum along gospel hymns. Sniffles and whimpers get louder and more distinct the closer the rows come to the altar. We can't keep the corner of our eyes off the open coffin, off the body, the human bullet and casket shell casing, a mother's heart pierced, her body slumped over, chin burrowed into her chest, her eyes glazed and bloodshot, tears appearing crimson red when plush against brown cheek. It's usually a brown cheek. It's usually a deep-rooted, hollowed-out kick drum heart. She weep, she pray, she cries, and somehow, she go on.
Haiku. White man says, speak tongue of this land. Red man asks, so how's your Navajo?
Run was like inspired. So I have spent probably more than half of my adult life living in predominantly Hispanic neighborhoods. And, you know, I'm a person who, when I live in those kinds of communities, I'm in those communities. I'm in there. I'm knowing my neighbors. You know what I'm saying? I live in a black neighborhood now, and I'm the same way. But when when I've lived in predominantly Hispanic neighborhoods, predominantly Latino neighborhoods, I always knew my neighbors. I always knew my community, and they had the same kind of stories to tell that we had. And it became evident that they're fighting the same enemy that black people in America are fighting. And so immigration has always been a hot button issue with me. Like for as long as I've been woke, immigration has been a hot button issue with me, along with anti-blackness. Maybe not as much as anti-blackness, but it's always been there. Plus, it's a lot of black immigrants too. You know what I'm saying? So that piece was just like me being in that community, but they were all the same people. And they were all people with a shared experience of oppression, which we also have. So that's kind of what that came out of.
Oh, Cinnamon, where you gonna run to? Cinnamon, where you gonna run to? Where you gonna run to? All along them day. No one runs from home unless home be a black hole, or a bear trap, or a lion's mouth. We come in covered wagons, by boat underneath tarps, in shipping containment units, poked with air holes too small to breathe out stenches. Mi hermanos, mi hermanas, mi primos, mi tío, mi tía, mi madre, no es mi padre muerto de mi padre, trust me. No one uproots their entire family, lest there be poison in the soil. They say we come with our hands out. How could we? In the dead of night, we grab everything we can carry. We leave behind heirlooms and photo albums. No one risks life and freedom who has the 3.5 years minimum it takes to do things the right way. So I run to the rock. Please hide me, I run to the rock. Please hide me, I run to the rock. Please hide me, Lord, all along them day. Lines dividing nations are imaginary. But the government-appointed gatekeepers down in customs and the self-appointed chicken hawk draft-dodging redneck fucking border patrol with their AR-15s and newly dropped soldier balls, well, let's just say they all have really vivid imaginations. Shit, Donald Trump imagined the Great Wall of China stretched across the Mexican border. And all his constituents are laminated head nods with weapons-grade picket signs masquerading as patriot protectors. We watch their guillotine tongues slice down on the napes of our children. Go back where you came from. No room here. No amnesty. No menial job openings. No welfare. They think folk can get welfare without social security numbers. No anchor babies. No birth certificate. No 14th Amendment for anchor babies. Float your little ass on back now. Their barbed wire voices bellowing out fire and shrapnel and pitchfork and shotgun, go the hell back home. But the rock cried out, I can't hide you, the rock cried out. I can't hide you, the rock cried out. I ain't gonna hide you, guy, all along them day. I said, rock, what's the matter with you, rock? Don't you see I need you, rock? Lord, Lord, Lord. And you just gonna sit there, huh? Sit there crucifix style with all your first world problems. Your 15 to 35% income tax brackets. The quasi-socialism pimping your outrage. Your fucking stub toe. You sit there, you thumb journalists, tapping away at your smartphone with all your dumbass platitudes, ranting about government spying all over Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, talking shit with your Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, YouTube, C-SPAN, Al Jazeera, Western Journalism, BuzzFeed, Breitbart.com economics degree. Your primetime sponsored expertise perpetually telling you the sky is falling, while you sit there behind a laptop in some coffee shop, sipping your fucking hipster pumpkin spice latte, cinnamon chai, macchiato, espresso, frappuccino, mocha chocolate, yaya, whatever the fuck. You open up a web article, another 39 Honduran children claiming refugee, seeking asylum. Your mouth be like, I'm not racist, but ... Your heart be like, more fucking brown bastards coming to take our job and eat off my paycheck and vote Democrat. You sit there wearing American like it's a merit badge, as if you earned it somehow. Like you did anything more than fall out of a pussy on the right side of the freedom line. When's the last time you sacrificed all for maybe shit? When's the last time you even bled a little? So I run to the river, it was bleeding, I run to the sea. It was bleeding, I run to the sea. It was bleeding. Blood, la sangre, sangro la misma sangre que tú. Soy humano, I plead with you. You answer, speak English, motherfucker. If I have to listen to one more automated system instruct me, for English, press 1. Para español, presione y dos. I'm gonna lose my shit. This is America, and we speak American. No one migrates to a land and opts out of communication with 86% of the population. No one chooses that kind of seclusion. Did it ever occur to you that maybe they're just really still trying to learn? You know how fucked up the English language is, yo? Synonym, homonym, antonym, your momonym, man, fuck this shit, man. Synonyms ain't always interchangeable. Words ain't always spelled phonetically. Not even a fucking word phonetic. The rule ain't always the rule. I ain't always before E. Ain't even a word, but it ain't like it ain't in the dictionary. Colloquialism, man. Ain't that a bitch? But it ain't just that, though. It's borrowed Latin. It's borrowed Arabic. It's appropriated patois. It's backwards subject-verb agreement. Ain't nobody got time for this shit. We trying to find home. We can't see a future on account of all the time we spend looking over our shoulders. All we ever really learn is to run. I run to the river, it was boiling, I run to the sea. It was boiling, I run to the sea. It was boiling all along them day. Haiku. White man says, speak tongue of this land. Red man asks, so how's your Navajo? I run to the Lord, please hide me, Lord. Don't you see me praying? Don't you see me down here praying? But the Lord said, go to the devil. The Lord said, go to the devil. He said, go to the devil. And so we come to America. And we come just in time to see Lady Liberty step off her block. She ain't blind enough to keep reading the words, give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses. She see clean through to the South Continent. San Pedro Sula, Honduras. The sex trafficking, kidnapping, cartel community murder capital. And she knows she's got her torch in the sky, pointing us all back